everyone, Tia from Order of the Bookish here. Thank you so much for joining us on another Author Talks interview. So I have a really exciting one for you today, and part of the reason I felt so drawn to this book is because it's in a place called Gemini, and I'm actually a Gemini, so anything Gemini related, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to read it, I have to look at it. So this is Yukari Morgan. She is a new independent author. She has her debut book coming out. Yukari, thank you so much for being with us today. Can you tell us more about your book and your writing inspiration, and tell us more about this town, Gemini?
Thank you for having me. My book is a dark fantasy that actually centers around 6 students. The main one is the new student in town, and he starts causing problems for the other 5 students. Each student kind of has their own secret. That's a thing about the town of Gemini is everyone has their secrets. It's a small town, but it's always had that haunted feel. And so these 5 students kind of have to figure out if this new kid is the reason why stuff in their town is growing even more wonky than normal.
So is it like multiple points of views, or is it one point of view and then we just know what the other characters are thinking, or is it third person?
I definitely, it's in third person with kind of like first person elements. It does jump around between all 5 characters, and then every now and then you'll get a glimpse of the new student's character perspective. It is a very heavily character-driven story.
Mhm.
So,
Okay, and where did you come up with this name Gemini for the town?
um, so this is actually this book. There's a sequel to this book that's coming up later, and the way that it's portrayed in the first book is going to be completely different than the way that it's portrayed in the second book. And so I guess the town of Gemini came up because this town is basically going to have 2 personalities that you get
Oh,
to
I
see with
love
each book.
that.
Yeah.
Very cool. That excites me. I'm happy about that. So I have to read the second one now too. So can you tell us a little bit about, your writing process for this book? Because third person, especially when you have multiple characters, can be a little bit harder. How long did it take you to create this plot and these characters and get the book from, an idea into an actual physical book?
So this idea was actually a mishmash of a couple of ideas that I had in high school. There were certain topics that I had always wanted to write about in high school and could never figure out how am I going to do this. And it took many years to kind of uh, figure out how to mash them all together and create the story. Um, Between writing the actual story and then doing my first edit, which I did completely by myself, that took 2 years. And it was very difficult when I started adding other editors onto the book because there was a lot of issue between what is it called? Head hopping.
Mm.
Um, I my book seems like it does a lot of head hopping because each chapter is told from a different character's perspective. And even though it's third person, you're basically like following over this person's shoulder or you're kind of in their brain. And I did have a number of editors tell me people are not going to like this.
Mm.
People like sticking with one perspective, maybe 2 perspectives, and it's harder to follow. And so there was a lot of push and pull between figuring out spots where I actually did need to cave and make it more towards this one person's perspective or change the language so that it was more neutral. And there were other spots where I very much pushed back to give more personality to my book, to be like, I'm sorry that we do a perspective change in this chapter, but it's kind of really necessary because of the way that I tell my book and the structure of my book.
Yeah.
So I don't really have a roadmap on how you pick how to do one or the other. It's really just a lot of gut feeling on, you know what? I trust my audience to be able to understand what's going on and to be able to follow instead of, spoon feeding or just converting to the norm, I
Mhm.
guess, of only having one person's perspective.
I'm
So,
so glad you just used the word spoon feeding. That's exactly what I just thought in my head too. I think some authors don't give enough readers credit. And you know, there is a point to be made that you should write to the market a little bit. So if you're a fantasy writer, you know, you do kind of want to stick to general popular themes, writing styles that we know the fantasy audience is going to enjoy and appreciate and want to read more of. But also, like, your book is you and it's your voice and it's very original. And I think we don't give enough readers credit in our attempts to step out of what the norm is. So I think it's really cool that you know, you got this feedback from your editors and you might have agreed in some parts, like, oh, okay, maybe it makes sense to make an adjustment, but you held fast and you knew this is my book, this is how I wanted it to be, and I trust my readers to understand. And I think that is absolutely incredible and something to really be commended because you know, it is hard as an indie author to stick with what you actually want to do and not, you know, fall for what everybody else is telling you should do.
Exactly. And those were questions that I definitely had to basically sit and process. Is how much do you want to write for profit, I guess, and try to push your writing in a way that sells on the market, and how much do you want to be true to yourself? And again, it's part of the process of learning how to what things you have to let go of and what things you're willing to hold on to. I think every author kind of has to figure that out for themselves. And again, there were certain things that I was very adamant about with my writing and my style. And there were other things that I had to like sit with and grin and bear and just kind of like, okay, I have to let this go. And I have to do some kind of, because at the end of the day, you do need your book to sell. So it's how much do you want to represent yourself, and how much are you willing to let go of to also see success?
Yeah. That's really good and really great. I do know a lot of authors who write and they publish a book because it's something that they want to do for themselves. They don't really care about selling it. But at the end of the day, if you're an author, you're also an entrepreneur. So you kind of have to think, oh, yes, I did this for myself, but I did this because I am working as a business and I need to make these sales. And especially if your goal is to become even a part-time or full-time author, those book sales are important. So yes, me too. So writing to your market and, you know, kind of appeasing the audience and what they're comfortable with is important, but also so with maintaining your voice. So finding that balance is always a little bit difficult. And I'm so glad that you were able to do it so successfully. So the next thing I do want to talk about is that this is a dark fantasy young adult book. So can you tell us a bit more about the darker side of this story that you've created?
Well, there is death in the book. There's a lot of heavy subjects that different teenagers go through. Basically, my whole group of kids that I revolve my book around, they're outcasts in some form or of another. I do have one kid that is bisexual. There's another kid that is African American. I have another kid that's Asian. There's one kid that's in special needs, and there is a white girl. I don't know how to say that more PC, but you know, I think that it's one thing that I've worried about, because I know I've seen pushback on, I am not any of these other races, so I shouldn't, like, almost like I don't have the right to write their perspective because I don't know it fully.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there's a whole discourse on this out on the internet, but at the end of the day, like, I feel like writers can only write what they know, and writing stuff that they only know somewhat a little bit about pushes them to learn more about that subject, because I did have to go out of my comfort zone. I did reach out to people in those other ethnicities and ask their opinion on these characters, and they became part of my writing process to refine these characters to be, I don't want to say more PC, but definitely less stereotypical, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you get a slice of everything, and you get a slice of different lifestyles, and you watch these lifestyles intermingle. And at the end of the day, it's not kumbaya because it's a dark fantasy, but you see that different people across different lines can still find common ground and can still become friends and get to know each other. So, yeah, that's a big thing that's about my book too.
Yeah, so I've seen that discourse on the internet, writers who are writing outside of their what their own demographic is. So let's say, for example, like I'm biracial, but I'm obviously like white on the outside. So if I were to write about like a Black woman or a biracial woman who's Black on the outside, like I would probably get a little bit of pushback from that side and say, oh, I don't understand that perspective. But just because you don't live that perspective doesn't mean that you're not able to write about it. I think to not put diversity in your book would not be reflective of what reality is. And even though it is a fantasy book, we do want to relate to those characters. We want to relate to that life a little bit, and we want to get involved in your story as much as possible. So the best way to get involved in your story is to have characters that are a reflection of ourselves. So I would relate more to the white girl. You might relate more to the Asian girl, and then et cetera, of all the other people that you've put into your book. And I think that's really important to put that diversity in because we do want to relate to stories. That's how we get involved in them. That's why we love them so much. And also, does anyone really like to read a book that doesn't have any kind of diversity? I feel like it ends up being kind of like plain and boring. That's just my 2 cents. Feel free to like cancel culture me for saying it, but yeah, I understand your hesitation for writing in that a little bit more divisive way because we do live in a cancel culture era where it is really easy for someone to look at a book and any kind of diversity and say, oh no, you did it wrong. But I think,
Yeah.
looking at your book, I think you've done a fantastic job. And I love that you put the diversity in and that you pushed yourself to really relate to those other demographics. And I think that's absolutely commendable and something writers should really take into consideration when they're creating their own characters. I know I certainly do for my books. So, I do want to talk more about, the fantasy element of this because you do have demons in your book. Can you tell us more about where you got inspired by the demons, what the demons do, what their actions are within your story?
I actually don't know how to talk about this without giving too much away.
Okay.
Um, Definitely some of these ideas come back from my earlier years in high school. Uh, I had a friend that we spoke a lot about the Christian religion with, and the main demon kind of falls into that area, and I don't want to say too much more, but a lot of the demons that I deal with in my story, they basically live within shadows. So imagine a world where within every shadow, something can pop up, something is watching you, something hears your thoughts. Um, these demons live in that realm, and there's kind of like a vampiristic element to it, where if you take these demons' blood, you'll also gain some of their powers, and some of those powers are that you're able to read the minds of other people around you. The 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 shadows that live within other people will start speaking to you. You'll start hearing the deeper, darker thoughts of other people around you, and it kind of explores this idea of what kind of advantages would you have in this world. Would you be willing to give yourself up or give up a little bit of your humanity to be able to get this superpower, and are you willing to pay the price? And
Mm.
I'm not going to go too much into the price because that's definitely going to give a little bit too much away in my book.
Mhm.
But yeah.
Wow, so very interesting. So you put a lot of like deep thought and a lot of research into this book. How long did it take the research? Because you did research, your characters and their demographic. You researched the Christianity aspect, and then you had this whole world building in the town of Gemini. So how long did it take you to really deep dive into the research to put into your book?
Well, because this is a story that I've been trying to write since I was in high school, and I am now in my 30s. It's been a lot of just parsing out different things that I'm interested in over the years, and then slowly again being able to put all of them together. So I guess the short answer is like over 10 years,
Okay.
but not 10 years of focused research. It's
Mhm.
10 years of just letting my brain run away with all these different ideas and then letting them all come together.
I get
So
that. Yeah. I think, as writers, we kind of spend our whole life doing research, and putting our interests into our book in some way, shape, or form, even if it's subconscious. So I get that. There's no really easy answer to put into that because, you are interested in so many things, and we see that now in your story. And I'm so glad that you've been able to explain all of that. So as you've been creating your book, because it did take quite a while between high school and now, and you said you had multiple different ideas that you then put together. Can you tell us what the most difficult part of this process was, either writing or, the editing, producing, or even the marketing? Like, what was the hardest part for you?
I think that along the way, every part has become the hardest part. There are different there are different struggles that you have to go through for each part of the journey. And as a creative soul, I think the best way to go about this is to say that the easiest part was the writing of the story. Because once I was able to get the bones of what I wanted to say out, like writing out the story was easy. With editing, it's the first time I've let someone else read my work. So there was like really strong growing pains with that. I'm really lucky that they tell you that when you have beta readers to find people that you're not related to because they're not going to have a biased opinion. I had
Mhm.
the opposite experience. I grabbed the people closest to me, and they were honest enough, friends and family, to be like, I don't think this works. This is not good. But they were also close enough to me where I could throw a tantrum at them and they weren't going to be like, okay, well, we can't be friends anymore.
Mm.
So that was the better experience for me. So I definitely don't agree with finding people that you're not close to.
Mm.
um, but after that, as a self-published author, because you have so much say, I definitely went through this process feeling like I wanted to understand every single part of the process. And there were a lot of moments where there was a lot of decision paralysis because of that.
Mm.
You get to pick your own cover and you get to pick your own formatting of the book.
Yeah.
Um, and so you think that all of these choices are a good thing until you actually have to make them. And then you're worried about how everything is going to affect everything else. And then you're just like, maybe I didn't want all this. Maybe I didn't know what I was signing up for. Um, at this moment in time, the hardest part of this journey has been trying to figure out how to advertise for this book because um I am not very good at going out and like trying to push my stuff on other people. I'm one of those people that's kind of like, if it seems like it's interesting, read it. But if I'm trying to make this as the thing that I want to do for the rest of my life, I kind of have to be more aggressive than that. And I'm still trying to figure that out and push myself out of my comfort zone for that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, you're not alone. I think almost all the authors that we've had an interview with, a lot of the authors that I work with, their hardest struggle has been the marketing. Because, we all as writers have an idea in our head and then getting it on paper is, like you said, the easiest part. Actually, I personally find marketing to be the easiest part. Marketing is like my baby, it's my favorite. So that's what I love to do. I love doing these interviews because it is marketing. So that's my favorite. Whereas writing my story and then editing my story, I found the harder part, because I know how to write a book to market. So it was just like, oh my gosh, how do I write my book the way I want to while also writing to market? So that was my struggle. But I love the marketing, and you're absolutely not alone. I feel like most independent authors, at least the ones I've talked to, also find marketing to be the struggle. But you're here, you're doing this interview, so you've already made a big leap out of your comfort zone, and that's a really amazing step. So thank you for being here and for doing that, because a lot of us, we do want to see your book out in the world, and we can't learn about your book and we can't have the opportunity to read it if we don't know it exists. So that's why marketing is so important as an independent author. You don't have anyone else doing it for you unless you were to hire someone. But you have to step out of your comfort zone, and you have to actually put in the time and the effort into being like, hey world, my book exists, this is what it's about, go check it out. And it's a lot of work. It is a lot of work, especially if you've never done it before. There's a lot of growing pains with it. But, that's why people like me exist and Order of the Bookish, because, I do want to see more books out in the world. So I'm happy to like help in any way I can.
I know
So
you've been so wonderful throughout this whole process. So
thank
I
you.
definitely am just like, yo, everyone, come here. Come here.
I try my best, I really do. And I'm so happy that I, get to make a living doing what I love, which is just like helping other people bring their voices out. I find it so exciting when I see an author make a book sale. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so proud of her. Because I'm happy. But so we've talked about, what your book is about. We've talked about like the darker elements, and we've talked about the diversity and your research and your writing and marketing struggles. So, what I really want to know now is, do you have any tips or advice for other new independent authors or writers who want to become a published author? Do you have any advice for all those people?
I think definitely the first thing is that make sure that you have a good support system, because I would not have been able to get through this without my husband constantly encouraging me every time I wanted to give up. And, I had that one person where when she told me, you know what, you can do this, you're a good writer and you can sell this book. Like, you only need that one person to believe in you for you to be like, yeah, I can do this, I got this. And
Mhm.
so I think that if you have a good support system, you can literally get through anything. Um, I think it's important to have other friends that are also writers. I had the benefit of having a brother-in-law who is also trying to become a published author. He's going the traditional route. I decided to take the wild route. Um, but having other author friends helps, because then you kind of help keep each other on track. When you lose motivation, they'll be like, look what I'm working on. And then all of a sudden you're like, all right, I can do this. Um, Basically, you just need a lot of things around you that will help remind you that you can do this.
Yeah,
Um, I don't know how helpful that is, but
that's very helpful.
I do know that there are a lot of places out there where you can join writers circles and things like that.
Mhm.
Um, and if you have a Facebook or if you're on social media, you'll be surprised at how many people are on your regular friends list that maybe you haven't talked to in a while, that
Mhm.
have more interest in your journey than you think they do.
Yeah.
So even just saying, hey, I need beta readers to your regular group of people, you'll people will come out of the woodworks to support you.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, absolutely. I fully agree with that. So Book Talk and Bookstagram are my two main areas where I communicate with authors and readers. And those two platforms, I have found so many friends there, and I have seen so much support, especially for new and independent authors, because, I'm not the only one. There's tons of us who are readers who really want to see your voice and your book out in the world. So anytime someone posts up something like, hey, I need beta readers, or hey, can you help me share this post and help me get out of like Instagram jail? There's so many of us who come together and we're like, yes, and we hit that like button and share and comment and DMs, and we're like ready to go to do whatever we need to do to support you. So I'm so happy that you came on and you had the interview with us. Thank you for sharing that advice, because I think what you said is fully accurate. It is really important to have a support system, whether it's friends, family, social media friends. Those people really help push you and help you sell your books, because that at the end of the day, this is what this is. You gotta make those book sales if you want to be a full-time writer.
I also have one more piece of advice.
Yeah.
Um, I am a very big goal-oriented person too. And one thing that has happened constantly is that I've had to push back the deadlines and timelines that I've
Mm.
had for myself in this journey. And so while I think that timelines and deadlines are good, you may feel like, oh, I need to publish at this date or publish at this time. Like, it's also important to like be very, very gentle with yourself
Yeah.
and don't be too hard on yourself. And I guess that's not just for the timeline, but that's for every part of the process. You really have to give yourself a lot of grace when you're learning something new. And I think that's something that I have definitely forgotten a lot over this journey. And
Mm.
so you kind of have to keep reminding yourself, you don't know what you're doing. And it's okay to be a little bit lost and to kind of like you know, what is it, wade out in that water a little bit,
Yeah.
but yourself and don't be too hard on yourself. Give yourself a lot of grace.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. That's absolutely incredible. I'm gonna make that like a soundbite of you don't know what you're doing, and that's okay. That needs to be everywhere. You don't know what you're doing. Because yes, none of us know what we're doing. I don't know what I'm doing. You don't know what you're doing. And we kind of just figure it out along the way and
Yeah.
hope that we try something and it works. And
Yeah.
what you did worked. You are now a published author. You've now done your first interview with me. Thank you so much. I feel honored for being your
Thank
first
you.
interviewer.
I
And
definitely hope I can come back in
oh
the
yeah,
future.
absolutely. Anytime you have my link, go ahead. I would be so happy to do this again, especially after our bookish boosters start reading your book. And with once we see those reviews come in, I would love to do another episode with you and just talk about those reviews and talk about that process of, how do you get reviews? How do you make those book sales? And more of like the marketing side, because that's my
I would
favorite.
definitely love to talk about that because I've had some ups and downs with that too. So, yeah.
Awesome. Yes. Okay. That's going to be our next episode. Everyone, thank you so much for tuning in today. We've had such an amazing time talking about Yukari Morgan's new book, The Fall of Eden, in this town of Gemini, which is so exciting because I'm a Gemini. Yukari, thank you so much for being here, sharing your story, sharing your tips. It has been absolutely amazing. And I'm really looking forward to doing this again soon.
Me too. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Happy reading, everybody. I'm going to put all of Yukari's links in the caption below. Make sure you go and check them out and support her on her writing journey. All right. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.